Hello, everyone. This is Tijen Genco, Master Certified Coach and Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach. You are tuned into Coaching with Mastery and Elegance with Tijen Genco. And this is part of the special series that I'm doing this year about the mastery. And I have such a pleasure to partner up today with one of my students and beautiful companion and colleague, Sajili Mohan Chawla. Welcome, Sajili.
Hello, Tijen. Very happy to be here.
Absolutely. And it's such a delightful thing to partner up with you today. So, before we start, Sajili, how would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Well, I think before I do that, I must say that it's such an honor to have this opportunity to really nuance my understanding, and I'm sure that of the listeners for what is masterful coaching. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Well, so I have, Tishan, I have worn many hats over the last 35 years. I qualified as an accountant. Then I ran a business. We scaled it over 20 years, made a successful exit. And that's when I studied to be an integral coach. Then I also studied the Enneagram and Reiki and aura cleansing and multiple healing modalities. And then, along with my coaching work, I got an opportunity to teach at a management school in Mumbai, India. And they have a very unusual department called the Science of Spirituality.
Mm.
So it's really about making management students more self aware, more self regulated, and really find their place in this interconnected world. So I was teaching for 5 years. And in the interim, I also did a master's in transpersonal psychology. I'm a student of the Upanishad and the Gita and Vedic chanting. So it's really a combination of coaching, training, teaching, which I offer. Yeah.
Yeah, what a beautiful, wholesome background, like a wholesome person that you are. And I guess I will say to our listeners that buckle up because you may have a scientific and a spiritual session for today. So, Sajili, which is our content that we're going to focus on today?
So I think, like I said, I think we can keep our attention to how do we nuance masterful coaching? How do we nuance our understanding of masterful coaching, really?
Mm.
And again, I must say that I have had the good fortune of observing you, studying with you, and there is so much that comes to mind where I'm left with, how does that happen? And so, yeah. And in fact, recently, congratulations, you were acknowledged by the ICF for your contribution as the co-lead
Yeah.
of the MCC
That's
Assessors Education Task Force,
yeah,
right? So I
yeah.
think it all adds up, and really, that's how would that be then?
Beautiful. Thank you. So I think that similar to your background, right? The listeners who are not aware, I have a bachelor's in electronics engineering. I started my career designing robots, and before I became a coach. But I'm also certified yoga mindfulness teacher and a Reiki master. So they all, as you said, it adds up. And it, to me, the coaching is an advanced communication skill. So when we look at it from that lens, how do we advance the communication? That comes as a question to mind. And as a lifelong seeker and a practitioner of human behavior, cognition, self-awareness, um, I often look at, and before I was a coach, in between being an engineer, I also was a Lean Six Sigma Masterful practitioner. That made me look into what creates this problem or what is the root cause quite often. So then I look at what disturbs the human relationship or what disturbs the human communication. And there I saw, this is most recent discovery, and I found a good language for it, that I think in the better communication, what we need to arrive at is a connection without attachment, which is a quite difficult concept that comes into being, that coach's ability, then the mastery, is to staying present. I don't like the language mindfulness in English because it is too focused in the mind. I kind of like the word that comes from yogic traditions, sthita prajna, right? There is that presence, wholesome presence without deviating, focus. But then there is also another word that comes into mind, that in harmony with all there is. That's part of the Taoist principle. So in a way, I think the detachment comes from ability to observe all there is, recognize where the harmony is and where disharmony is, and respond from that wholesome presence to the person in front of you. So that seems like a lot of thing to do, but or be rather, right? That how do we then come to that holistic presence and a detached awareness? I think that all there is contributes to the mastery, and the rest becomes appreciating the other competencies about structuring the session, responding, reflecting, questioning, but that all comes from, I mean, we all speak one language that we can actually relate by forming a language to another person, but the rest, I think, comes to how do we hold the space, be in that space without attaching ourselves to ourselves or the other person. What do you think about that?
That's a lot that you pack in there.
Yeah.
It's interesting you use the word called sthita prajna. And yes, but I think what really struck me is when you said that we're really listening and tuning into what disturbs human communication, the harmony and the disharmony aspect of it, you know. And you put it across beautifully that if there is that observation and there is that connection without being attached, then I think the offering feeds into masterful coaching, if I can say that. So you are a practitioner, you are a coach, a trainer, a mentor, an assessor. So what else would you say, having yourself worn so many hats, what else would you say which could help us understand masterful coaching?
I think that really, I don't know if I said it in the sessions that you were present, Sajili, but what I often say that when we are awed by the person in front of us and their experience and observing it from that point of view in, again, detached observation and allowing ourselves to be moved by it without a judgment and to respond to that. That's really is the mastery. So in one, I have a concept that I call it holistic listening. That involves utilizing the human system as an instrument, every facet of it, to hear and respond. In fact, I'm expanding that concept in the new version of my book to speak about listening through eyes, listening through mind, listening through language, linguistic centers, listening through heart, listening through gallbladder, all that is, right? Part of the system, systemic awareness, and all of that produces data. And unfortunately, that the coach schools around the world, as you mentioned earlier, I have access to because I assess the trainings. I teach some of them, but I also assess trainings around the world, including the languages that I don't speak, is focused most of the time to analytical responses. That leaves a lot of information on the table for the coach and the client. And this is why I say, what have you heard or didn't hear and you didn't say to the client? And then students tell me, oh yeah, it was this. Why didn't you say that? I didn't know if I could say that. Of course, you needed to say that ethically even, right? Because that's what we are doing. So I think that mastery requires, first of all, sovereignty as a coach in our system, right? If our mind is going over here, over there, we're going back into, am I good enough? Whatever it is happening, then we're listening the art piece, leaving the art piece in front of us and focusing on ourselves. It's like going to a beautiful museum with a mirror or the selfie thing on your hand and not seeing anything. So that is part of the holistic listening, holistic producing, co-creating a response. And that's why I included Taoist principles, sensing, universal also partnership. What is it that being asked of me in this moment to respond to this piece of art in front of me, to help them produce the best results for themselves? It isn't about me. It is about them. And I don't know what is best for them. I can only present.
I love what you say. Responding to this piece of art in front of me. And I think somewhere I get reminded of the ICF's definition of partnering and partner coaching being a partnership in a thought-provoking and creative process. But to your point about holistic listening and systemic awareness, with your permission, I get reminded, and I really want to share that in one of the calls when we were a couple of us, and one of the participants was the client, and you were the coach. It really, it just showcases what you're just saying. So if I can just quickly share that. So here was the client who was speaking about her relationship with her parent, and something had happened, and she was hurt and angry and feeling unappreciated, and there was a lot out there. And all of us as coaches, we are taught about reflection, to begin with a reflection. And your reflection was so distilled. It was just 3 words: sending you hugs. And that it spoke of the trust and safety in that relationship. And with just those three words, the client felt so heard and so held. All of us saw it on the call. And then, after that pause, you move to two more words, just two more words. You're fired. And all of us were taken aback in that moment. And then there was like a burst of laughter. And I think it took a while for me definitely to process, to then see that that the emotional charge of the client's story, how you as a master coach had steered clear of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the client's need and belief for permission, you spoke right into it. And I don't think even the client had realized that. It was direct communication with humor, plus the client suddenly felt as if there was a choice which she had missed. uh, the energy, the mood, everything pivoted in that moment. And I think when you speak about systemic awareness and holistic listening and gallbladder and really every part of your body and environment being there, this just came to my mind. I mean, it was 5 words and the conversation had just leaped into a different direction. So yeah, so that's your masterful magic.
Thank
But
you.
at this point, I wonder whether you would like to speak a little about and tell us about some of the courses which you offer, which help us develop this aspect in us. The neurological aspect and the spiritual aspect, because really this awareness needs that awakening.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, what I was doing there, again, what happens is this is why I said it in the beginning, connecting without attachment. Because any one of us, when we see somebody is crying in front of us and saying that they do everything they can and still feel unappreciated, we want to side with that person, don't we?
Sure.
And then we want to condemn the other person. But the thing is, we don't know the real purpose of that experience, value of that experience in the human development for the client. And therefore, we need to observe the art without touching or wanting to go in any direction.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was doing there, this is, I often teach this in my mentor classes because you wanted me to relate to that, is to listening that way and responding that way to the client. So in the compassionate response, I heard you in a way, I hug you, and then responding with you are fired was about reflecting to the relational storyline because she was hiring herself for the role when the parent wanted to fire the person from the role. So, and in a way, I was showing all that attachment, detachment, and everything, and the freedom, as you were saying. So, what I was doing with the humor is that's something that I teach in a neurologic approach to coaching course. There is a particular technique that I teach. That's an 8-week course I've been dividing into 2 sections lately. That in the NLP and cognitive distortion focus of the 4-week of the course, which I call it Genco method reconstructive inquiry. So in a way that I was supporting the client to create the space which the nervous system so much hungry for. That laughter invited that to have the nervous system flow in a different way with the break of a laughter and the cry, as you saw it later on, that I was pointing out, this is a love story. So that was a different part of the conversation. So inviting the client to self-regulate through a response that I teach through the neurologic approach to coach training. But the hug part, the reflection hug part, came from listening somatically and seeing where was the most energy needed and the energetically, and presenting that in the space. How helpful was that?
I think you've unpacked it beautifully. And I mean, listening to you, it almost seems obvious. And yet all of us who have held space as a coach know know why it is masterful coaching in that sense, you know. So yeah. Where you spoke about the love story, so that also brings to mind that at some point you, if we go back to that example, you did speak about, you know, from your Six years, you have the ability to see the characters as two stick figures and see what is missing, and then you saw that both the parent and the participant in this case, the client, was looking for love. So not only are you looking at the client as a whole, but in that systemic awareness, you're also bringing your whole self to the process. What has allowed you to shape that?
Yeah, so again, detached connection, right? I connected the client to appreciate their experience, but I did not only connected the client. In the absence of the parent, I also connected to parent.
Mm,
That's part of the holistic listening concept. And I
mm,
connected to the higher wisdoms of the universe to see what was the harmonic version of this harmonic experience. And the harmonic version of that is often enables the beautiful flows in our system, right? That's what we do through certain movements such as yoga, tai chi, and then whatever we do. So then I was looking to see what is the tagline or headline of this story. That the two people wanted to connect and love one another, but they were kept missing the connectivity.
mm,
That's what I saw with my Lean Six Sigma processing space.
mm,
That was the, as I called it, thing beneath the thing.
mm,
It wasn't about doing stuff and not being appreciated and all that. If you strip all that noise, this is, as you know, I call it in my book, distillation.
mm,
And that's the real part of the work that coach needs to do.
mm,
And what is left? What is left is two people wanting to experience flow of love between two individuals, and they are somehow unable to get into that.
mm,
So then it really, if you think about it, let's divide it into the proficiency, this
mm,
conversation.
mm,
In the beginning level of the competency, as often we call it ACC, associate coach level, coach will just get into right away, okay, so what do you want out of this conversation? And then the client will bash more about their parent. and you get into some level of strategy, if the coach knows a little bit about dynamics, it is likely going to end up boundary setting, whatever, which is a band-aid. Again, I teach this on my neurologic approach to coach training. So if there is a little bit more proficiency, which we will often call professional certified coach level, then coach can have a little bit more dialogue, client can process some level of emotions with the coach feeling pity for the client, right? That's the worst thing you can do. And coach trying to make the client feel better and whatnot. And they could, again, come up maybe some boundary setting strategies or the division of workload, transferring some things to the rest of the siblings or whatever. We're still not touching the root cause of the problem.
Sure.
Even in the beginning of mastery level, coach could hear a little bit more, talk about the client's metaphoric response to this. Maybe the victimization or power loss is going to come out. But then the story often will end up, because I listen hundreds and thousands of recordings, will end up then how is the coach, a client is going to empower themselves in the relationship, stand up for themselves. Even at the mastery level, you're going to get to that. But how do we get to the soul to soul, bone to bone? You know, when you're like as a yoga teacher, you may appreciate that we say it in, at least in the Western world, if you're going to give an adjustment to somebody, it has to be like a bone to bone, so it's not misinterpreted. So soul to soul, bone to bone adjustment to this situation. What is it that they are looking for? Soul to soul. If I bring those two souls together in front of a fireplace without all this clutter, what are they going to talk about? Yeah. That's what I'm interested in. This is the soul level coaching, which I am not teaching yet because I need enough graduates of the other levels to get to that deeper level holistic response.
Beautiful. Soul to soul, bone to bone, music to my ears.
Thank you.
And I think so many thoughts come to mind, but I think what I'd pick on first is it also speaks about you embodying all this, you know, and what would you say is if you speak about embodiment and practices as a coach, what would you say makes it can help us become more proficient then?
Yeah,
in the embodiment journey.
Yeah, I wonder, I often go back to the origin of the words when I look at how one can progress and what happened, right? The culture is fluent and then we lose the original meaning. And sometimes I play with the words. So when I spell embodiment in English, I often spell it as IN-bodiment. So, so
interesting.
Right. So we need to in the body in order to respond. So that means that the coach needs to be present in home to observe what is happening. And that's where the mind coaching mindset come into place. And that's the word I don't like so much in English. But when we cast our energy, when we're going into the past to unresolved things, we're casting our essence and energy to the past, into the ghost lands, and it's not available to the present moment. When we're worrying about something, we're casting our energy to the future. It is no longer available to us. So therefore, we have limited essence to stay present, to relate. So this is the energetic approach to coaching. So we need to first be in the system to utilize the systemic capability. If I'm not in my cockpit, then all of the buttons are wasted, right? I say to my executives, I say that, in fact, some of my executives used to be active military pilots. So I would say to them, looks like to me, you left the cockpit, you're serving tea and wondering why the plane is going where it goes. You need to be the strategic leader. Right? So that's what we do all the time. And this is why you hear me say often in my mentor sessions, do your own work. Because when we don't do our own work, we don't have the resilience to stay present in body. So whenever we, like, if, let's say that session, if we had the similar this harmonic relationship with anybody in our family with the different power dynamic, what's going to happen? It's going to be the transference. You're going to start feeling that this comfort and so on. So you want to actually get the client to some level of relief so you feel relieved. So that's the emotional resilience, that can you stay present in that space to respond. So coming back to your question, embodiment requires awareness about how do we, and I intentionally use this word, cast our energy throughout the day. What am I doing with my essence? Where is that goal? And what thoughts, and this is go back into the mindfulness practices, which I call it mind emptiness practices, because like, what is the mind doing? What sorts of, and this is, again, I teach it in the neurologic approach more so, which thought takes me where? As a result, what happens in my visceral system, an energetic system, becoming more aware. And therefore now establishing a new relationship to that thought, or expiring that thought, appreciating what to subscribe to, what not to subscribe to, becoming aware of those things. And also doing whatever needs to be done to come to a level of indifference. Even in Buddhist practices, I see the prayers are like, may this person be out of suffering. That is still a judgment. We don't know the meaning and usefulness of suffering. I mean, I often say that it is helpful to have loving, caring people in our lives, but the people who makes us suffer the most gets us to learn the most. So
I think you will get many nods on that.
We don't like them. This is why we have the other people, other crew. But so therefore, indifference, non-judgmental stance. And but in using our vessel, this is why I use the language of harmony, because when we're in harmonic state, energies are flowing well. So if we can actually understand, oh, this thought is actually making me tense and so on, that also help us to get to this non-judgmental, embodied stance of our housing of our own spirit toward holistic coaching and masterful response.
And I love the way you said this, that, you've got to be in the system to move towards a systemic awareness. And I think the cockpit visual is really something which is, which Says it all. It really says it all. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This also then takes me to another point, which is that when you say to be in the system, uh, and you just spoke about starting with robotics and then the Six Sigma and so on and so forth. But then what I've also noticed is that it's not that that was the past and you've packed it and put it away and then begun, a new life and with this whole coaching study. You've sort of embraced it all, and you pull out when in that whole systemic awareness, uh, your messaging or your intuition comes can come from any place.
Yeah.
So I remember in that instance which we've been speaking about, you spoke about seeing stick figures and then coming to the fact that it was a love story. And I remember all of us were left saying, how did you get to that? And you said, well, I did that, the two stick figure things. My point being, can you speak into something which will help us point us in the direction of embracing our experience and our skill sets
Mhm.
um, to inform our coaching?
Yeah, beautiful. This actually, I run not frequently, but branding and niche workshops. I started this when I was in corporate, and then my coaching students started to ask me because the standard marketing things didn't resonate with them. So in there, I often say that coaching is not the first profession. One seems to become to a certain level of maturity and then, or sometimes one feel burned out in something and then they come into coaching. But the thing is, and they leave that past in the past. They don't want nothing to do with it. And that leaves a black hole. It leaves the health or the essence in the system somewhere unutilized or underutilized. So in order for somebody to have an effective brand and niche, that needs to be embraced and brought into integration. And then the best utilization. Often, you will appreciate this. When I was in the corporate world, people were asking me, "Oh, don't talk about you are being a yoga teacher. Remove that from your bio, and you have to be this. You have to have a different websites for your coaching executives and the yoga and so on." And I did that. It wasn't feeling right for me. When I returned from my social responsible efforts, 3 months of serving in India, I couldn't tolerate not being me anymore. So I wrote a blog, I called it Coming Out of the Closet, which some of my friends thought I was changing my preferences, but that wasn't that. Really bringing me out in the open and allowing people to decide whatever they want to decide with it. This is why that I describe clearly who I am as a coach on my website, and the right person for that will show up, and the person that is not looking for that, they will go away to look for another person. So integration of one's history into being is a significant thing for their capability and the hosting and staying present in the dashboard, in the cockpit. Because otherwise, some of the part of you knows how to push certain buttons are going to be serving the tea in the back of the plane. And you're like, oh, what happened?
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's beautifully what you say, that it's this integrated whole being which is then making that offering of being in that systemic awareness, in that space of holistic listening. And I don't think there's any other way to be. And like I said earlier, you make it sound so obvious. Yeah.
It wasn't easy, though. I think I pioneer for a lot of people to bring different sides of together and weave into one. But again, appreciating that, I was thinking, talking to another colleague from India from a few years ago, and I was saying to him that probably it is not a coincidence I was born in Turkey, between a bridge between East and West. So elevating myself to the higher level, then I struggled to bridge that, right? But then I needed to find a way to enable the self. And now I can actually help others. So whatever the things then struggling us is also an indication where the power resides. It may not be an easy journey integrating our past, especially when there are heartbreaks. But that's where the resilience and the beauty comes into place, because those things are our unique features. Yeah.
Yes, and I think this also ties up very well to something which you said, that you could not tolerate not being you.
Yeah.
And therefore, and that was the segue into really the masterful coach emerging therefrom.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a wonderful conversation, Tijen. Thank you. You've really taken us to places, and so many gems thrown in, and the beautiful metaphor of the cockpit. I think that in itself will stay with us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I think I really have the feeling that now I want to sit and let all of this, like water, find its level inside of me. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sajili, for being here and having this beautiful dialogue with me. I appreciate that. And those of you who are listening to us, this is Coaching with Mastery and Elegance with Tijen Genco. I have my companion Sajili Mohan Chawla with me today. If you liked what you heard, consider subscribing to us, leaving us a feedback. We appreciate those of you already done that. And Sajili, tell us, our audience, if they're interested in finding you and benefiting from your offerings, how will they go about doing that?
That's so generous of you, Tijen. Thank you. Well, they can just go to my website, which is my full name, sajilimohanchawla.com. And it's the same name which they can find on LinkedIn.
Excellent. And we can put those in our show notes. So thank you, Sajili, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in to us.
Thank you. Thank you.